They're starting to at least cover, but will a road team actually win a game in these NBA playoffs? Mark Zeno and I will take a look at a couple of road teams in tonight's playoff action and debate which is more likely to go over its team total on Tuesday. Also, did you like that Dante DiVincenzo prop from yesterday? We've got another prop bet that you need to make tonight. But Indiana at Milwaukee, game 2 tonight, 8:30 Eastern time. Bucks -1 at home. They open -1.5. And the total here really on the move, 226.5 down to 221 per the WagerTalk.com live odds screen. What do you think about that big move on the total? And the Pacers can't possibly play any worse than they did in game 1, can they?
No, and that's really part of it. And Milwaukee, which of course is Algonquin for the good land, they played a very good game in game 1, surprising to a lot of people. But there's a couple of things that I think you can bank on not happening again. Number one, Dame Lillard scoring 35 in the first half is not going to happen again. So the sizable lead that they built at halftime where they scored 69 points is not going to be what it was, or at least shouldn't be. I think there has to be some semblance of regression here. And Indiana as a team that this year in the NBA, when we talk about teams in terms of offensive efficiency, was second in the NBA behind only Boston, is not going to have the same level of game where they shoot 39% from the field and 21% from three. Something has to get better. There has to be some sort of normalization and regression here to the mean in game 2. So if we take out the fact that, let's just give Dame Lillard a very good half and having 16 or 17, and the Pacers shooting just average at about 45, 46% from the field, we close this gap quite a bit here. And I just don't know that the Bucks as a team defensively are good enough to hold down this Indiana offense for 2 consecutive games. So it got away from Indiana very quickly. I don't think it happens again here. And in reality, if Milwaukee was that much better, they'd be a much bigger favorite. We saw all these teams from yesterday who played game 2 get a little bump in the line that they had. Not the case here for the Bucks.
I wanted to ask you a question, though, Mark. Which team more likely to go over its team total tonight? Pacers 110.5 or Suns 104.5? Sounds like, unless if you're holding something back with Phoenix, you feel a little bit more strongly about the Pacers going over its team total.
I think when you talk about the big three that they have with Booker, Durant, and Beal, they're a better offense overall with those three on the floor than Indiana is. If you look at the analytics and the PER and things of that nature, averaging about 120 points per 100 possessions is Phoenix with those three on the floor. So I think they're a better offense. But, you're also going up against the best defense in the league in Minnesota. And that really is the issue why I would lean Indiana here. I mean, I would love to take Phoenix, but when push comes to shove, there are 2 things that Minnesota does really well. One of them, obviously, is play defense. And the other one is, slow the game down. Bottom 10 in the league in pace. And that's not really the case for Milwaukee, who plays fast, and their defense isn't very good. So everything points, in my opinion, to Indiana getting over their team total in this game, despite the fact that it's a little bit of a bigger number.
I'll make the case for Phoenix to possibly go over its team total tonight. Now, the total for this game, Suns are 3-point underdogs, by the way, in Minnesota. And the total's been bet down from 213.5 to 211.5. Truthfully, Mark, the way these games have been staying under, 9-2 so far in the playoffs, going back to Saturday, I'm really not that big of a rush to be betting anything over right now, especially because no losing team has scored more than 104 in this year's playoffs. But Suns T-Wolves game 1 was one of the 2 that did make it over, albeit just barely. And that was with Phoenix shooting just 44% overall, 32% from 3. You said it. I agree. Obviously, the numbers agree. Minnesota's outstanding defensively. They were number 1 in the league in efficiency by a wide margin. In fact, the gap in defensive efficiency between Minnesota and the number 2 team, Orlando, is wider than the gap between the Orlando and the number 13 team in defensive efficiency, just to give you an idea how good the T-Wolves were at that end of the floor. But Phoenix, this season, 5-1 to the over, following a game in which it scored 100 points or less. And they themselves have scored at least 105 in all 6 of those games. I bring that up because, as I said earlier, the team total is 104.5. So at least this season's results suggest Phoenix can make it over this team total. That's the NBA playoffs. Our little primer to start the show. We've got another player prop for you at the end. Hopefully as good as the DiVincenzo one yesterday. But Mark, Major League Baseball also in action today. A full slate. You got something you're looking at. You held up your end of the double play with San Diego laying a run and a half. It took a while for him to build some space with the Rockies. But you got something else for the people today. And this is the first five, so they won't have to wait as long.
Yeah, thank God. And it also is not out on the West Coast, so you don't have to stay up that late either. So, which is always a critical part of handicapping. If you can get in bed by 11 and have all your games done, it's a beautiful thing. So make sure you take that into account every time you're handicapping, as Brian Power always would. But, I'm going to look to Toronto and Kansas City here. Second game of their 3-game set at Kauffman Stadium. Tight game last night with the Blue Jays coming out with a 5-3 win. Kevin Gausman on the mound for Toronto against Michael Wacha. BP, you and I debated Kevin Gausman, and we heard some reports. You saw him early on. In his opening start, only lasted 4 1/3. Got rocked by the Yankees in his second, lasting only an inning and a third. And then in the start against Colorado, only lasted 3 2/3, 10 hits, 6 runs. And we were hearing some sort of scuttlebutt about him, maybe possibly his arm being sore, not being ready. Well, then he did all he did last time against the Yankees at the Rogers Center, 5 innings, 4 hits, 1 run, and struck out 6. So he looks like he's righted himself. And I'm going to bank on the fact that he is and that he has righted himself here. And he will come out and have a very good start against Kansas City, despite the fact that the Royals' numbers are pretty good at home. Going up against Michael Wacha, who also has been pretty impressive since coming over from San Diego. Outside of the start that he had at the New York Mets 2 weeks ago, where he went 6 innings, 10 hits, and gave up 5 runs. He's been really solid throughout his starts, going at least 5 innings in all of them, never giving up more than 3 runs in any of them. And the one time he did was against the Orioles, one of the more accomplished lineups. I don't think the Blue Jays lineup is anywhere near as good as Baltimore's, but he's striking guys out. He's not walking a bunch here. So we're going to go first 5 under between Toronto with Kevin Gausman on the mound and KC with Michael Wacha. First 5 under 4.5 here for my part of the double play today.
Time for me to hold up my end of the bargain here. I am also looking at a first 5 play on Tuesday, although it is a side. Orioles, first 5, and I'm going to lay the half run against the Angels. Stop me when you heard this before, guys. Baltimore just keeps on winning. Most profitable team to bet on in all of baseball last 3 seasons. And Grayson Rodriguez will be on the bump tonight. We all know how outstanding this guy is going back to last July. Number 1 in the American League in stuff plus, in pitching plus, in the more traditional stats during that time. You're talking about a 2.59 ERA, a 2.98 FIP. And tonight, he's facing an Angels lineup that just has not done a lot of damage at the plate of late. Scored 2 runs or less in 5 of the last 6 games. Oh, by the way, Baltimore's 4-0 in Rodriguez starts so far this season, while the Angels are 0-4 when Griffin Canning is on the mound. Canning does get the start tonight, and he has an 8.05 ERA in those previous 4 starts with 5 home runs allowed. I think this just looks like a good old-fashioned mismatch in the starting pitching department. So I would lay the half run with the O's in the first 5. What a debut it was. That DiVincenzo prop cashed in the 3rd quarter. No sweat at all. I mean, we thought it was going to be a sweat, and it wasn't.
It never fails when you're back in Italian. I mean, what can I tell you?
Hey. Anyway, that's why I'm always Joe Ranieri's number 1 fan. I'll tell you that. Anyway, I digress. Let's talk. The zigzag theory is something everyone talks about this time of year in the NBA playoffs. Yeah. But it's funny because I think you can apply it to player props as well. That's kind of what we did with DiVincenzo, right? He was coming off a lousy game in game 1. We thought there was a lot of room for him to bounce back in game 2. He did. And there's a player on the Indiana Pacers who did not play well in game 1 that we think is going to bounce back in game 2. It is Tyrese Haliburton. Why don't you tell our fine viewers what to expect from Mr. Haliburton tonight in game 2 against Milwaukee?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. He only had 9 points. I mean, he did have 7 rebounds and 8 assists. So, across the board, just a little bit shy of a triple-double. But, it was interesting. He only took 7 shots in the game. And that, to me, is, again, not a formula for success. I mean, he was 4 of 7. But he's got to be able to score. He's got to be able to fill it up. And not only that, he's the facilitator in the offense here. So, I expect his numbers to get up. But if you kind of look at, his profile, When he is not scoring a ton of points, he's dishing it off like he did in the last 2 games of the regular season. He went 12-13, 19-12. When he is filling it up, what happens? What do we get? Well, we get 30-5, right? Even at that, this is a guy who had 12-8 against Miami. So we're right there on that cusp of that 20.5 kind of deal. But look, I think when it comes to Tyrese Haliburton, if he is not a major part of this Indiana offense, they're not going to get over their team total. They're not going to be able to stay in this game, and they're certainly not going to win it. So it's really up to Haliburton here to be the locomotive that pulls the train for the Pacers offense here. He should be putting up close to 20 and 10 assists. For a guy who averages 20.1 and nearly 11 assists a game, this is right in the wheelhouse here. Could be a little bit of a sweat again, but if things are going well for the Pacers, I'm not sure it will be.
So that is today's player prop. Tyrese Haliburton over 29.5 points and assists. Let's make it 2 for 2 with the player props here.